Mike Rao about the conflict between her faith and her job. Mike?
To Joyce Taylor, God is always with her, even at work. To her boss, the issue is insubordination. It's a letter that's gotten Joyce Taylor into big trouble with her boss.
I'm a social worker at a local children's services agency.
The letter to the editor appeared in Friday's Lancaster Eagle Gazette.
As a Christian, I feel that God needs to be involved in the lives of abused and neglected children.
Joyce is a single mom and an investigator for Perry County Children's Services. While checking out allegations of child abuse, she got to know Nicole Presgraves, an investigation that uncovered nothing wrong.
She told me the case was closed. And from that point, you know, as far as I was concerned, she was no longer my caseworker. I was no longer her client. And we spoke briefly, and I just told her how much, you know, I knew and praised God for getting us through this ordeal.
As is customary, Joyce wrote a final report. In the part that says counseling recommendations, she wrote the Lord. But the report never reached Nicole. A secretary intercepted it and gave it to the Director of Children's Services, John Elkis.
He started yelling, and he said, "You take that off of there. If this went to court, what would they think?" And then he said, "Well, you need to keep God out of work."
Joyce agreed to remove the reference to the Lord from the report.
I know about the separation of church and state, and we need to have that. But at the same time, I wasn't pushing my religious beliefs on anyone.
I would have been quite tickled to see that letter and see the Lord on there. I would not have taken it offensively.
It could have ended there, but Joyce felt strongly enough to write the newspaper.
I wanted to voice my opinion of what I had went through there.
Her letter to the editor never mentions the county or the director by name. Nevertheless, she's been suspended for 3 days without pay. The Director of Children's Services declined our request for an on-camera interview, but he did tell me that he believes Taylor committed insubordination when she wrote the letter to the newspaper, and that's why she was suspended. The Employee's Handbook for Children's Services does not specifically forbid religion from being discussed in the workplace, but it does say an employee can be fired for insubordination, for failing to comply with written or verbal instructions.
I know jobs are scarce right now, but I also don't feel that if I am to be fired, I don't deserve to be fired, because I think I do a good job.
Even a sign at the Perry County Courthouse sends a mixed message about the separation of church and state. Is it okay to say God bless America, but it's not okay to write the Lord on a county document?
I think her director has completely overreacted, and you know, I think he's trying to lose a great asset in Joyce. You know, I think she's wonderful at her job. She's a great benefit to the children in this community.
It's really important, Americans, we need to keep our freedom of speech, you know, and it shouldn't matter what our beliefs are, whether we're atheists or Christians, we should have that right, you know, to be able to speak out about those beliefs.
Joyce goes back to work tomorrow, not knowing if she'll have a job much longer. The Director of Children's Services insists he does not have a problem with people expressing their opinions, but in this case, it's become a personnel matter, and he won't comment any further. Well, we wanted to take a closer look at the limits on freedom of speech, so we invited attorney Benson Woolman to join us tonight. Benson, does she have a right to put that word, the Lord, on that report?
Well, interestingly enough, I think the director is correct in setting the standard for what ought or ought not to be on formal governmental reports. She's stated, indeed, in her subsequent letter that where there's a window of opportunity to share my faith with another, what is really so wrong with that? In general, people do have that right. But when you're sitting as a public employee, paid for by public tax dollars, you're really not supposed to share your religious views with other people, even though ultimately the other person might welcome it. So in this sense, I think the director was correct in intervening to remove that particular portion. The other side of this, though, is after the fact, you have the director apparently then reprimanding her for insubordination. If that arises because of the letter that was published, then indeed there is a substantial First Amendment value that protects her.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Is it insubordination for an employee to write a letter to the newspaper to talk about their place of work, whether they're a public employee or if you work for a private company.
Well, the limitations on you are much more stringent if you work for a private company, because there, if they decide to get rid of you, Ohio is what's called an employment at will state, meaning that an employer can get rid of anyone for any reason except certain illegal reasons like discrimination. In this instance, though, the employee is an employee of a public entity, and so then you have government acting. By the definition they have in their handbook, it doesn't seem like she violated any rule, because, in fact, the letter that went out was corrected. She didn't grab the letter and then rush it into the mail or something like that. She did write a letter to the newspaper, and that ought not to be punished by
Benson, we've got just a couple of seconds here. I want to ask you the bottom line question. Can they fire her for this?
Well, when somebody says, can they do something, if I get a call from somebody in county jail, can they arrest me for something? I say, are you calling from county jail? They say yes. The answer is they did. The real question is, longer term, they certainly ought not to act in any way against her. They probably should reinstate her 3 days of the suspension. But most of all, I think they'd be inviting an unwarranted well, they'd be taking unwarranted conduct if they did try to fire her simply for writing this letter, okay. And then, of course, speaking with you.
All right, thank you very much, Benson Woolman, for kind of talking about this very sticky issue. Well, I want to hear what you have to say about this story. Should Joyce Taylor be punished for her actions involving the Lord? Log on to WSYX6.com. Write your comments and opinions. We'll have the results on News Center at 10 and 11. We'll also put Joyce's letter to the editor on our website so that you can read it for yourself.